Manx Radio's Update with Christian Jones.
It's 5 o'clock on Thursday, the 10th of April. First of my good afternoon, and this is Manx Radio's Update. Welcome into 30 minutes of all the latest news, sport and travel compiled from the resources of Manx Radio's newsroom tonight. The value of the Isle of Man's reserves fell by around 5% in the immediate aftermath of Donald Trump's global import tariffs. New figures show the island saw its lowest number of births in more than a century last year, and a 16-year-old student has been crowned as the newest Manx Youth Bard. As always, do get in touch if you want to comment on anything you hear. Text WhatsApp to 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. First of all, though, the headlines with Amy Griffiths. Fastamai.
The Treasury Minister says it's difficult to inspire economic confidence when people see the chaotic scene caused by America's tariff announcements. Last week, Donald Trump unveiled plans to introduce global import levies before confirming he was pausing the rollout last night. Dr. Allenson says the uncertainty is challenging.
It's very difficult to inspire confidence in people when they're turning on the news and seeing what can only be described as a bit of a chaotic scene around the world.
The Council of Ministers has rejected claims it mishandled a planned hearing with the island's former airport director. A Tynwald committee said cancelling Gary Cobb's appearance last October was unacceptable and potentially in contempt of Tynwald Court. But government wants clearer rules on who can be called to give evidence. The Isle of Man recorded its lowest number of births in over a century last year, with just 574 babies born in 2024. Researcher Paul Crane warns the shrinking number of young people could impact schools, the workforce and tax contributions. The newly crowned Manx Youth Bard says she started writing poetry as a healthy outlet. Ellie Reynolds, a student at QE2 High School in Peel, is said to have captivated the judges with her powerful writing.
I'd been going through a really hard time with my mental health, and I wrote about that a lot in my poetry. It was a very healthy outlet for me to use.
To international news now, and as we've been hearing, stock markets in the US have again opened down after Donald Trump's 90-day pause on higher import tariffs. There are still concerns because Chinese goods heading to America are still being slapped with a 125% tax. The EU's pausing its countermeasures. The UK Prime Minister's promised 3,000 new neighbourhood police officers by the start of 2026 in England and Wales. Sir Keir Starmer told an event a £200 million investment will tackle the culture of crime. And two of the world's biggest fashion houses are joining forces. Prada has agreed to buy Versace in a deal worth more than £1 billion.
Thanks for that, Amy. Now let's take a quick look at the weather, brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Staying fine this evening, then clear overnight with light winds and minimum temperatures of 5 degrees Celsius. Another dry day tomorrow with long spells of sunshine, light and variable breezes, with temperatures rising to around 15 degrees Celsius in the afternoon.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
If you run a small business or just need more room in the back, Philshaw Vehicles has the perfect van or light commercial for all your needs and can sort out any finance. Based in the Tremode Estate, view philshawvehicles.im or call 49 51 49.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Beldorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company, Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
SMS Trading have moved to 3 St Paul's Square, Ramsey. For flat pack to fully built, new or second-hand furniture, SMS Trading offer all-island delivery and man-in-a-van service. Call 315151 or find SMS Trading on Facebook.
At Begode Cattery, we have been caring for animals for over 50 years. As a cattery, we care for customers' cats and treat them as our own. Contact Begode Cattery on 676 947 or find Begode Cattery on Facebook.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Approaching 5 minutes past 5, and the Treasury Minister has criticised US President Donald Trump's handling of trade policy, describing recent tariff announcements as a chaotic scene that undermines global economic confidence. President Trump revealed sweeping global import tariffs last week, only to abruptly suspend the plans last night. The volatility triggered sharp market reactions. Although there's been a partial recovery, Treasury Minister Alex Allinson has told Manx Radio the value of the Isle of Man's reserves fell by around 5% in the immediate aftermath.
We've seen tariffs being announced one day and then reversed the next. I think there is that gut reaction from the markets, and we've certainly seen that last week in terms of quite rapid falls of 5-10% in certain markets, little bits of rebound, but we're living our lives through pronouncements on social media and press conferences in the middle of the night for our time, and then trying to digest that and see what the implications it will have. In the budget speech, I made the case that what we needed on the Isle of Man was certainty, particularly to inspire business confidence and consumer confidence to keep our economy going. And that's why we brought in a raft of measures to try to present that in terms of cutting the rate of income tax, as we said we would, not all the way down, but the first step, increasing personal allowances, increasing the thresholds for national insurance, increasing the thresholds for child benefit, increasing benefits. But it's very difficult to inspire confidence in people when they're turning on the news and seeing what can only be described as a bit of a chaotic scene around the world, and people trying to react to the implications of what is happening. I think it will take us probably a couple of weeks to figure out the exact implications of all of these, whether some of the tariffs are rolled back, whether there can be negotiations for trade agreements, and they're already being talked about. But in the short term, it's meant that there's been a correction of the stock markets. They've slumped all around the world. So when we look at our reserves and the actual day-to-day value of those, based on how much the shares and bonds are worth, that has gone down by probably around about 5%, in line with all the markets. Of course, that's not a loss of money. That's the overall value of it. But if we were to draw down on reserves, then we might crystallise some of that loss.
Treasury Minister Alex Allinson speaking there. Let's turn our eyes now to Bus Vannin, who's launching a 6-month awareness initiative aimed at improving accessibility for mobility scooter users and is calling on Class 2 scooter users to apply. The trial will assess the experience of passengers with mobility challenges, including how easily they can board and exit buses along Route 21. Dawn Kinnish, a member of the Department of Infrastructure, who's also the chair of the Accessibility Group, says the project marks a key step towards more inclusive transport services.
It's been a journey. It's been a slow journey. I can't deny that. But I think the important thing is politically, we haven't taken our eye off this at all. Accessibility has become front and centre, particularly for the department. I chair the Accessibility Steering Group. There is much more to be done, but the journey has started. We get a lot of information in the Accessibility Steering Group about projects that are coming forward. We give advice. We have lay members on there who represent those with disabilities or have disabilities themselves. We have changed the report mechanism where you can report a problem. There's an accessibility tab to that now. So if you live somewhere and you can't complete your journey because there's no drop curb, use that function, report it, because as soon as it's reported, it's on the work stream and then something can get done about it. But unless they know, then things are difficult to change.
And being part of the accessibility group, do you also believe that having this option available for people will also give them that independence or help them gain that independence, to leave the home and go out and do stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine anything worse than feeling that you are trapped in your home. Having some sort of social interaction, doing your own shopping, just that daily interaction with people, it's a massive thing for an individual, for your mental health, for your well-being. So it's really, really important that we do start to address this.
That's Dawn Kinnish, the chair of the government's Accessibility Group, speaking there. Now, mobility scooter user Eric Corkish collected his application from the C terminal this week, and while he welcomes the initiative, he says it's long overdue.
The history of this goes back unbelievably till September 2019. So it's taken over 5 years to get to where we are today. And the other thing which has really got me annoyed is this trial is lasting for 6 months before they do any more. So by the time this trial is over, it'll have been 6 years exactly without being able to get on a bus. And to me, that is absolutely ridiculous.
So do you feel that during that 6 months, they should be focusing not just on Douglas, but in the other areas around the island as well?
they should roll it out to the 4 different areas in the island, and then they would get a proper result. Just going around Williston or whatever else it is in Douglas, they're not really getting a fair result of a trial or what's happening. There's plenty of other people who'd be quite happy to take part in the trial around the island, and that's the way it should be.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
The Isle of Man saw its lowest number of births in more than a century last year. Just 574 babies were born. Population researcher Paul Crane says the island's in a period of natural decline with more deaths than births. He's warning this could affect everything from schools to the number of people paying tax in future. But there is a bit of good news. Overall population numbers are up slightly thanks to inward migration. I sat down with Mr. Crane, who told me the findings are very significant.
The births now are 43.9% lower than they were in 2010, and that's an extraordinary drop in births. So we've dropped from over 1,000 births to under 600 births in those 14 years. And it's part of a bigger picture. The Isle of Man's population is ageing in part because of people getting older, but ageing too because of the reduced number of younger people coming in.
And alongside that, we've seen the highest number of deaths in 25 years. What does that growing gap mean for the island's population trends?
So the gap last year, there were over 350 more deaths than births. In terms of going forward, if that level is maintained, it means we would need, for the population not to decline, we would need at least 350 people more moving into the Isle of Man than there are moving out of the Isle of Man. So it would require considerable movement in to make up for that deficiency of births against deaths.
Can immigration alone compensate for the island's natural decline, or are there actually limits to relying on that?
Theoretically, in numbers, it could do. We have had periods in the past. In the 1970s, for example, we had periods where I think there were 10,500 new residents arrived in the Isle of Man in a 5-year period between 1971 and 1976. So those sort of numbers, could make a difference, but they'll never fill the gaps that you've created. In other words, at the moment, for migration to make up what we're losing, we'd need under 15-year-olds to be coming in, and that's not what you'd be getting.
Population researcher there, that's Paul Crane. You can find more details about that at manxradio.com. 13 minutes past 5, and there's been a strong response from the Isle of Man government after a parliamentary committee criticised how a hearing with the former airport director was handled. The Council of Ministers has now issued its side of the story, pushing back against claims of wrongdoing. Siobhan Fletcher joins us now. Faster by Siobhan. Just remind us what this dispute's about.
Faster by Christian. Yes, this centres around a planned evidence session with Gary Cobb, the former director of Ronaldsway Airport, who was due to appear before the Economic Policy Review Committee in October last year. Now, you might remember that hearing was cancelled at the last minute, less than 24 hours beforehand, after Mr Cobb was told not to attend unless a government minister could be present alongside him. The committee said this was a missed opportunity and even suggested it could amount to a contempt of Tynwald.
Right, and how has the Council of Ministers responded to that?
Well, quite robustly. In a detailed response just published, the government says the Minister and Chief Officer were never told about the invitation in the first place. They argue this went against long-standing constitutional norms, where civil servants give evidence under ministerial authority, not independently. They've cited guidance used in the UK, known as the Osmotherly Rules, which they say should help shape clearer procedures here on the island.
So has the government accepted any fault in how this was handled?
Well, to an extent. The government does acknowledge that informing the committee of Mr Cobb's non-attendance so late in the day was unfair and that things could have been handled better. But they say the mix-up was due to the minister simply not knowing about the invitation, and in fact he had a funeral to attend on the day in question. They also say a new hearing was offered with both a new airport director and the minister present, but that offer wasn't taken up.
All right, OK, so what happens now?
The Council of Ministers is recommending that new rules and guidance be drawn up around how witnesses are invited to appear before committees. They've proposed rewording Tynwald's motion to reflect that both sides could have handled things better. And while they reaffirm the idea that parliamentary duties should take precedence, they're arguing that that needs to be clearly defined, particularly when personal matters are involved.
All right, Siobhan, thank you very much for that.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
A few things to be aware of today. The mountain road is closed between the bungalow and Craigenbar until tomorrow. Next week, the road will close from the bungalow to Ramsey on Monday at 9:30 through till Thursday. That's 24 hours a day. But businesses will be remaining open on the mountain. In Onchan, temporary lights on the King Edward Road near the Majestic Drive turn for pavement work. In Douglas, temporary lights on Summerhill near the bottom of the hill for gas work. And in Quegg until Wednesday, temporary lights on the Old Castletown Road near the brewery for wastewater upgrade work. In Crosby, temporary lights on the main road for street light improvement work. That's between the Crosby Crossroads and Morown Church. In Cronkyvoddy, temporary lights on the TT course for carriageway repairs. Also, across tomorrow and Saturday, there'll be various road closures around the island for the Manx Rally. More details on that can be found at manxradio.com. Turning our attention to the steam packet, nothing to be aware of there. And over at the airport, all looking to time on the departures and arrivals board.
Quayside Tyres and Service Centre with 1 year's free engine warranty from Castrol. Get more with Quayside. You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Approaching 17 minutes past 5 now, and Ramsey MHK says it's time to move forward with long-standing proposals to build a replacement for the ageing Cumnall Moor residential home. This is Laurie Hooper. He told the House of Keys the current facility is no longer fit for purpose, and a new building planned on neighbouring land has been under discussion for more than a decade. He says it's vital the project remains on track.
It's not just about making sure that the current residents get a better facility, it's also about making sure that whoever comes in next is going to be in something that's modern, that's up to date. As the Minister said earlier, the staff there do a fantastic job. The facility itself is really well run. People I talked to down there are quite happy with things, but actually in terms of making sure they're getting the best possible facility for them to live in, actually Ramsey really does need to have that facility built.
So it's old-fashioned, the idea is to replace it with a modern one.
That's basically it in a nutshell, yeah. And again, that's been the plan now for nearly 10 years, as far as I can make out. That the idea was to get a planning permission to do a land swap with the local housing committee and actually build something more modern, more up to date, pretty much like they've done in Douglas with the new facility. So again, it's making sure that we're getting updates and capital investment in Ramsey rather than everything being concentrated in the east.
And the idea is to move on to land next to it, and then Cumnall Moor would go to the commissioners.
That was the original plan back in whenever it was that it all started, and as far as I know, that plan is still kind of what they're talking about. From what the Minister was saying this morning, it seems like they're still progressing with the plans on that current site, which is really good news.
But is there a danger of the land being lost?
I think there is a risk of that, and this is why I was pushing the Minister to make sure that she is really in communication with all the stakeholders, because ultimately the Housing Committee have their own obligations. There's desperately a need for more social housing across the island, and I know the Commissioners and the Housing Committee in the North are quite keen to support that objective as well. So I think if the Minister doesn't push things forward on quite a speedy timetable, there obviously remains a risk.
I think she said it was fifth on the agenda.
It is, but I think what she neglected to say is that the top few have already gone through. So Radcliffe Villas, for example, has already gone through Tynwald. So when the Minister says that this is going to be coming to Tynwald before the summer recess, I mean, what are we in now, April? So you've got 2 or 3 months before this is going to be more public and it's going to come through Tynwald. So I'm quite reassured that the Minister has recommitted today to make sure they are going to be building that facility.
Ramsey MHK Laurie Hooper speaking to John Moss there. 19 minutes past 5 and 14 days until the local authority elections. A Castletown Commissioner seeking re-election says he would lobby government to introduce an island-wide leisure rate to help secure the future of the southern swimming pool. This is Colin Leather. He says recent changes, including the new fire station car park, have eased parking concerns, but he also wants to see a handrail installed in Barrack Square to support those with mobility issues. He's also calling for urgent government support to refurbish homes at Farrans Park, which he describes as being in desperate need of investment.
Housing is a major problem, and that is one thing that we do have to solve. The way I think forward is to work with the private sector, joint ventures with the public sector and the private sector. We've got houses that are in desperate need of refurbishment. Farrans Park is now way past its sell-by date. So that is the first thing, that the next stage for refurbishment of the houses that we need to start looking on. Given the length of time that it takes to get a project underway, that is something that I would want to start straight away in badgering government to say, look, Farrans Park houses need refurbishing.
Some decisions made by the board have been quite controversial, the square, the removal of the parking. So what do you think residents will make of that come polling day?
Well, as you say, it's controversial, but it's also 50-50. You either like the square with no cars in it, or you don't like the square with no cars in it. With regards to parking, I firmly believe that we now have an opportunity to put a car park on the fire station site, and we've had it looked at. There's room for 70 cars, which are just a few minutes walk from the centre of the town, and it's the answer really to the parking problems. With the swimming pool, it's funded by the Southern authorities. The people in Douglas, Onken, pay no contribution whatsoever to the NSC. That to me is totally wrong. I definitely would push for an all-island leisure rate.
The other candidates standing are Tony Brown, Beth Cannon, John Kringle, William Galley, Alan Leonard, Mahendra Kumar Patel, Carol Quine and Lawrence Watterson. Now, a 16-year-old student from QE2 High School has been named as this year's Manx Youth Bard. This is Ellie Simmons, and she was officially crowned during a ceremony at Douglas City Library and becomes the 7th young poet to hold the title since the initiative began in 2019. She'll represent youth poetry on the island for the next year and has been discussing how her passion for writing began.
I'd been going through a really hard time with my mental health, and I had a friendship that wasn't great. And I wrote about that a lot in my poetry. It was a very healthy outlet for me to use. But I think the real inspiration, as, I don't know, cliche as this might be, was probably Taylor Swift. Because probably 3 years ago now, I would sit and I would analyse her lyrics like they were poetry. Because they are. Like, you could argue her lyrics are poetry. But she definitely, set something off in me that then led me to write my own poems. I'll do this one. I really like this one. I wrote this one on a bus at 8 a.m. on my way to Ramsey.
Wow.
Yeah, and it didn't take me too long to write, but it's one of my favourites.
Has it got a title?
This is called A Poet. Why do you write poetry? They ask, and the question washes over me, making me feel slightly sick. Because the truth is, I don't know why I write poetry. I was never shown how to in school. We read poetry, but never wrote it. And now I am a poet, or at least that's what they call me. I've always used odd ways to express myself, through dance and song rather than spoken words. Poetry, while words, is more thoughtful, something that, like a ballet piece, I can perfect. Poetry is a strange language on the surface. It never makes much sense, but beyond that, it's philosophy, beauty, treasure, recollections of the past and present to be reminisced. What I mean is, I write poetry to remember, to express a moment into cryptic, nonsensical words that possibly one day could be interpreted to allow me to finally be understood.
Pretty incredible stuff right there. Huge well done to Ellie Simmons, the 7th Manx Youth Bard. And you can hear more from Ellie on Manx Radio's Spotlight programme, available now as a podcast. Now, the TT is definitely fast approaching. Even the weather you can feel gearing up for the racing fortnight. Fingers crossed it holds out. And although it might be around the corner, the racing season is already underway in Derby. The Andros Racing Association Championship kick-started at the end of March, and the meeting takes place this Sunday. The competition runs until October. The chairman, Linda Alton-Heath, and club secretary Neil Champion spoke about the growth of the event.
We're getting a little bit of just a handful of riders coming across to come and race with us. We're building a good reputation and people are going back and saying they had a great time. The nature of Derby is it's not all about horsepower. So if you're a good rider, you can make do without having the peak horsepower. You can get out there and go racing without spending a huge amount of money. Have a play, see if you enjoy it, learn your skills, and then progress if you turn out.
Linda, a little bit for those who don't know as well, there are a lot of different classes covered within the ARA season as well. There is a real variety out there. Could you just give us an idea of the variety that's going on within the classes again this season? How many different types of machines we've got out there?
We run 7 different races across a race day, and we run each of those races twice. Within those races, there can be a number of classes. I think there's 13 or 14 different race classes covered throughout the day.
Where were some of the standout performers on the opening weekend, would you say?
We obviously have our Centre Championship race. We had Jamie Kringle win both of those. Ryan was away, but watching Jamie race, I don't think it would have mattered if Ryan was there.
How excited is the ARA about next generation riders, if you like, of whatever age coming through?
Really excited. And, even a couple of years ago, I was amazed at how many are coming through, and it's just actually going from strength to strength. And our guys are just going on really well. So, people like Marcus Simpson and Joe Yeardsley, who really made a splash at the Manx Grand Prix, they came through our race school just a few years ago and through the championship. And just to drop a name, a young lad, I think he's still only 15, George Cowie. I know his dad really well. He came through and he actually upgraded to a clubman's licence when he was across at Alton the other weekend. So he's already not wearing his yellow, his orange novice bib.
Right, sport time now. Fast to my Rob Pritchard.
Fast to my Christian. First tonight, the Isle of Man women's national cricket squad has been announced for its latest international tournament being held next week. A total of 14 players will represent the island at a quadrangular series being held at the Happy Valley Ground in Episcopi in Cyprus from the 18th to the 20th of April. The Isle of Man will face the host Cyprus as well as Jersey and Denmark in 6 games across 3 days. Well, in the squad itself will also be 2 national team debuts, with Isle of Man cricket confirming Georgie Ford and Lola Hornby-Wheeler will join the team for the first time. This tournament will form part of the squad's preparations for its first ever appearance in the ICC Women's World Cup qualifiers in late May in the Europe Qualifier Division 2, taking place in Rome in Italy. Well, since its inception, the Isle of Man women's national side has already secured a number of international honours. The most recent of those was winning the Valletta Cup in Malta in August last year. In motorsport, Rob Hodson will contest the Isle of Man TT races with the SMT Racing Squad for a 3rd successive year. The Wigan man plans to take on all of the solo classes on the Snaefell Mountain course in 2025, and among his arsenal will be an ex-Michael Dunlop Honda Fireblade machine for the 1000cc races. Ahead of the racing fortnight, Hodson outlined his plans to challenge for top 10 finishes across the board, as well as a possible Super Twin podium. And in cycling, 2 Isle of Man riders look set to return to World Tour action this weekend. The iconic Paris-Roubaix Monuments races will take place in France, with a women's event on Saturday and the men's race a day later. As it stands, Manx competitor Lizzie Holden is on the provisional start list for the women's race, and elsewhere, fellow Islander Max Walker is confirmed in the EF Education Easy Post squad for the men's event on Sunday.
Thank you very much for that, Rob. Well, that's all for Update this evening. Thanks to newsreader Amy Griffiths. Do head on over to Manx Radio's podcast sections if there's anything you heard you want to take a closer look at. Up next is Fiona McCardle with Chuck Clare. Greatest hits with Chris Kinley after that from 6. Dave Moore is back with you on Update tomorrow. So until next time, take care. Bye-bye for now.